I ask you to give me a few moments of your time to explain to you why people like me question almost everything. You see, when I was growing up, you could open up the refrigerator door, and on the inside of that refrigerator door, there would be plastic tubs. And those plastic tubs, they may say like Cool Whip or Whip Topping or Great Value Sour Cream or Cottage Cheese or Country Crock or something like that. But there was only about a 25% chance whatever was advertised on the outside was actually what was on the inside. See, you hoped and you prayed you weren't opening up a science experiment that got forgot about in the fridge and it make your eyeballs water when you opened it up. You see, this began to build a little distrust in us as young children because we learned that not everything was as advertised. You see, in the process of growing up, we would hear things like eggs were healthy to eat and whether or not milk was good to drink. We were told one week it wasn't designed for humans, and the very next week there would be posters all over the halls of our schools asking, "Got milk?" right? Then we were told you could drink milk as long as it was pasteurized. If you drink raw milk, it's going to kill you. We talked to our grandparents about it. Turned out they were raised on raw milk and everything was just fine, so we began drinking raw milk, and voila, we felt a whole lot better. We began eating eggs that were raised on our own little patch of land that we might be able to live on, and they were delicious, and so we tried to raise our own eggs and milk our own cows. And then somewhere about the 6th grade for me, I'm not sure how old you were, a government official came out and he said, "Hey, we can't find somewhere around $2.3 trillion. Whoopsie, we just don't know where it is." Then the very next day after that was a day that we all know as 9/11. Yes, when the World Trade Centers got hit and the Pentagon got hit. And the other airplane crashed as well, killing all the passengers on board. Now, we all sat glued to our television screens watching these buildings burn, trying to figure out what happened. Unfortunately, those buildings did end up collapsing and killing thousands of people. But if you paid attention when those buildings collapsed, or if you have went and watched anybody explain the speed of which they fell, it was almost as if they were purposely demolished. That is the rate that they fell at. They imploded like a building that was meant for being demolished. Then we heard about Building 7. Building 7 didn't get hit by no airplane. It just so happened that somehow or another it caught fire just the right way because it was just in the right spot, and it also collapsed from the heat. But if you watch the video from it, it also fell at the rate of gravity, meaning it is as if it was demolished. And then we waited for our government to give us an explanation of what happened. And they finally came out with one, and this is what they told us. They said, "Listen, we believe this has to do with Osama bin Laden and his buddies. You understand, his buddies, they learned to fly Cessna airplane." And we all said, "What's that got to do with commercial jet airliners?" And they said, "Well, they hijacked these commercial jet airliners with box cutters, and they took their knowledge of Cessna airplanes and they used that to precisely fly these commercial jet airliners into the World Trade Centers and into the Pentagon." That was the explanation given to us. And then if we give ourselves just a little bit more time, we were told, "Hey, by the way, we also got to go to war with Iraq." We all said, "What's Iraq got to do with this?" And they said, "Well, they got weapons of mass destruction." We got over there. Turns out they were really good at playing hide and go seek because they had no weapons of mass destruction, and our friends and your sons and daughters died because our government lied to us and baited us into a war that we should have probably never been in. However, as calloused as it sounds to say, time went on and we continued going to school. Now, while we were going to school, our teachers told us, you don't want to have a physical labor job. You don't want to work in the trades. You want to work in the office. You want to not have to work so physically hard. But then when we graduated, a bunch of us went to college and we learned that our college degrees weren't going to be worth anything. The jobs that we were going to get with them was not going to pay us enough to offset the cost of the mortgage-sized student loan payment that we were going to have. We realized we were lied to going through school. And then we learned that people that did have those office-type jobs where they did not have to work quite so physically hard, well, now they had many health issues due to their sedimentary lifestyle, due to the fact they weren't up and moving around nearly so much. And then we turned to our faith, and unfortunately we found out many of our churches and many of the so-called people of God were fake, and they were just pretending, and they don't really mean it. And so then we tried to find a group of people that actually meant it, and you see, things got a little bit muddy. And then we learned that health foods such as oats were raised with pesticides. And that pesticide that's in the oats that transfers to the food lowers sperm counts and messes up estrogen in women and gives us all kinds of infertility trouble as adults. So then we learned our food system's poisoning us. Then we were told not to eat red meat because it's going to give you a heart attack. Now we're told today you probably ought to go on the carnivore diet to help your joints because all of the grains and all of the other stuff they told you was good for you before, well, actually we're finding out it's really bad for you. And then we get to somewhere around 2019 and we learn of a lab in Wuhan, China. And this lab is supposed to be studying viruses of bats, you know, just in case it happens to jump from bat to human. This has never happened before, they said, and it's really not a very high probability, but we need to study it. We need to be able to develop vaccines just in case this were to happen. And just almost like they spoke it into existence, guess what happened? Well, in Wuhan, China, there was an outbreak of a said coronavirus. They told us all came from a bat, and then we learned what it would take in order for that to go from a bat to a human, and the probability of that actually happening in nature was very, 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 very small. And so we all decided, you know what probably happened is it probably leaked out of the lab, but we were all kicked off of social media and all those types of things for saying such a thing. So then, as this spread, we were told, wait a minute, this is only going to go from animal to human. It can't go human to human. We found out that was a lie. And then we were told, hey, it won't get to the United States. And then we found out that was a lie. And then it got to the United States. We all had to be locked down for 2 weeks to slow the spread. And 2 weeks turned into like 2 years. And then we learned that coronavirus doesn't understand directional signs in the Walmarts, because you had to follow the arrows in the Walmarts to make sure you could go get the stuff that you needed to have. We were also told that if you put plastic covers over the debit card machines at the grocery store, that nobody's going to get COVID, but everybody was still touching that same plastic cover just like they would have touched the buttons. And then when we went through the drive-through restaurants, which were essential, by the way, some way, somehow, which best I can tell, the world went on a long time before McDonald's. However, these restaurants that were essential, we put our debit card or our cash or whatever it was on the little tray, and then they would take that cash in, they would grab your cash, they'd grab your food, put it on the tray, hand it back out there. See, we were all touching the same things, and people like me, our minds would blow up when we would do this, because we were going through all kinds of extra steps unnecessarily, because nothing actually changed. We were told you could put on any mask that you wanted to, and it was all proper PPE. However, having jobs that require PPE for different things, you understand that you had different masks or different coverages or different things for different chemicals or different environments. They weren't all the same, which means a handkerchief, a shirt, and a piece of mesh or an N95 mask cannot cover you exactly the same. We all understand and know that, but never fear, they have a new doohickey that they're going to put into your arm, newly developed, not by the lab in Wuhan, China, by the way. This was a different one that was developed, and it's novel, and we've never used it before, but we're going to stick it to you in your arm, and everything's going to be okay. But it turns out people weren't okay. People were fainting live on television. Soccer players were dying trying to play soccer on TV. And then it turned out people were having swollen hearts, and they were having cancer rates that were going through the roof, and people were getting filled full of blood clots. And what was supposed to be so safe and effective, we're learning quickly, is not so safe and effective. So excuse me when people like me find out that they have genetically modified a dairy cow, and they have put human DNA in the mammary glands of that cow, so whenever the milk is milked out of that cow, it is producing human insulin. And not only that, by the way, that cow couldn't get pregnant. They did not see that coming, so they just went ahead and gave it specific hormones to make it lactate, and they're going to clone that cow to make a whole herd of cattle to produce human insulin. Excuse me for not exactly trusting that, because you see, not everything is as it's advertised. My name is Justin. This has been Built on Faith Homestead, or Leaving Egypt, depending on which video platform you prefer to watch your content on. I appreciate you watching.